Welcome back to Haunted Horror Stories. In today's episode, I'm sharing 7 true disturbing stories from the loneliest stretches of American highways. These are tales of truckers who encountered something in the dead of night that no amount of diesel fuel and chrome could protect them from. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Story 1. Interstate 80 through Nevada is pretty much what you'd expect. Flat, empty, and dark enough that your headlights feel like the only thing keeping the universe from collapsing in on itself. I've been driving long haul for about 8 years when this happened, mostly running electronics from California to the Midwest. The money was decent, and I liked the solitude. My ex-wife used to say I preferred the company of my CB radio to actual people, and maybe she wasn't entirely wrong. It was late October, I think, could have been early November. I remember the heater in my Peterbilt wasn't working right, and I kept having to mess with it every hour or so. I'd left Sacramento around 9 at night, planning to push through to Salt Lake City before my hours ran out. The coffee I'd grabbed at the truck stop tasted burnt, like they'd left the pot on the burner too long, but I drank it anyway. You get used to bad coffee in this job. Around 2 in the morning, I was somewhere past Winnemucca. There's this stretch where you don't see much of anything for miles, no towns, no rest stops, just darkness pressing against your windows. The radio had gone to static about 20 minutes back, which wasn't unusual. I was flipping through channels, trying to find something besides that empty hiss, when I saw the figure standing on the shoulder. At first, I thought it was a stranded motorist. You see that sometimes someone broke down trying to flag help. But as my headlights swept over them, something felt off. They were just standing there, perfectly still, not waving or holding a phone or doing anything you'd expect from someone who needed assistance. Wearing what looked like a dark coat or jacket. I couldn't see their face. I should have kept driving. That's what you're supposed to do on these empty highways. You don't stop for anything unless you're sure it's safe. But I'd been helped before when my rig broke down outside Elko, and I guess I felt like I owed the universe some karma. I started slowing down, checking my mirrors. No other vehicles, just me and this person on the side of the road. I pulled onto the shoulder about 30 feet past them, engine idling, air brakes hissing. Through my passenger mirror, I could see them still standing in exactly the same position. They hadn't turned around, hadn't acknowledged my truck at all. The hair on my arms was standing up, and I told myself it was just the cold air leaking through the weather stripping. I grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket and climbed down from the cab. The wind out there was bitter and dry, carrying the smell of sage and something else I couldn't place, something that reminded me of an old freezer that hadn't been cleaned. My boots crunched on the gravel shoulder. "Hey," I called out. "You need help." The figure didn't move, didn't respond. I took a few steps closer, sweeping my flashlight toward them, and that's when I saw there was no broken down vehicle. No car, no motorcycle, nothing. Just this person standing alone in the middle of nowhere. "You all right?" I tried again, my voice sounding thinner than I wanted. They turned to face me then, and the movement was too smooth, like their whole body was rotating on a fixed axis rather than shifting weight from foot to foot the way people do. The flashlight beam caught their face, and my mouth went completely dry. Their features were wrong, not deformed exactly, but the proportions were off. The distance between their eyes was too wide, and their mouth seemed too small for their face, like someone had drawn it on as an afterthought. I froze, couldn't make myself move forward or backward. They took a step toward me, and their gait was off too, joints bending at angles that didn't match human anatomy. Their arms hung too far down their sides, fingers nearly brushing their knees. "Do you have room?" they asked, and the voice was the worst part. It sounded like 3 or 4 different people speaking at once, slightly out of sync with each other. A man's voice, a woman's voice, maybe a child's, all layered together. I finally found my feet and started backing toward my truck. "No, sorry, I don't take passengers. Company policy." They took another step, then another, moving faster now, closing the distance between us with those wrong, jerking movements. I turned and ran. 30 feet felt like a mile. I could hear footsteps behind me, but they didn't sound right, no rhythm to them, just irregular impacts on the gravel like someone learning to walk for the first time. I grabbed the door handle, hauled myself up into the cab, and slammed the door. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely get the lock engaged. Through the windshield, I saw them standing directly in front of my truck, bathed in my headlights. They tilted their heads slowly, impossibly far to the side, at least 70 degrees, and I swear to God they smiled. Their mouth stretched wider than any human mouth should, revealing teeth that looked too sharp. I threw the truck into gear and hit the gas. The Peterbilt lurched forward, and I honestly don't know if I expected to hit them or if I thought they'd move. But at the last second, they stepped aside with that same fluid, unnatural movement. As I passed, they turned their head to follow my truck, maintaining that horrible tilted angle. I watched them in my side mirror until they disappeared into the darkness. My heart was slamming against my ribs so hard I thought I might be having a heart attack. I didn't slow down for the next 100 miles, didn't stop until I reached a well-lit truck stop outside Battle Mountain, where there were at least a dozen other rigs parked. When I got out to check my truck, I don't know why, some part of me needed to look. I found handprints on my passenger side door, not on the handle where you'd grab to open it, but higher up on the window. The prints were too large, fingers too long, and they were pressed into the metal of the door frame like it was wet clay. The metal was actually indented. I took a picture with my phone, hands still trembling. Then I got back in my cab and sat there until sunrise, doors locked, lights on, CB radio turned up just to hear other human voices. I still drive that route sometimes. You don't really get a choice in this job. You take the loads they give you. But I never stop on that stretch of 80 anymore. Never slow down, never pull over, no matter what I see standing on the shoulder. And I've seen that figure 3 more times over the years, always in the same general area, always standing perfectly still until my headlights find them. The handprints are still in my door. I never got them fixed. I tell myself it's because bodywork is expensive, but really, I think I need the reminder. Need proof that I didn't imagine it. Story 2. My dad drove trucks for 37 years before his knees gave out and he had to retire. He's the one who taught me the routes, taught me how to read the weight stations, taught me which rest stops had the cleanest showers. When he heard I was taking a load through Montana in January, he called me up, which was unusual because Dad wasn't much for phone calls. "Listen, Clara," he said, and I could hear something tense in his voice. "If you're taking Route 200 through the mountains, don't stop at the old Ranger Station rest area, the one about 40 miles west of Great Falls." I'd driven that route before, knew the rest area he meant. It had been closed for years, chain across the entrance, weeds growing through the pavement. Why would I stop there? It's been shut down forever. He was quiet for a long moment. "Just don't. If you break down near there, keep driving, call for a tow, but don't stop." He wouldn't elaborate, and I didn't push. Dad wasn't superstitious or dramatic. If he was warning me, there was a reason. I told him I'd be careful and left it at that. The load was automotive parts, heading to a distributor in Missoula. Nothing complicated. I left Billings around 4 in the afternoon, planning to drive through the night. The weather was clear, which was lucky for January in Montana. I'd done this run enough times that I could practically drive it in my sleep, which is maybe why I didn't notice the problem with my fuel gauge until it was too late. Somewhere past Lincoln, the truck started coughing. I looked down and saw the needle buried on empty, which made no sense because I'd filled up 3 hours ago in Helena. Should have had at least another 100 miles in the tank, but trucks are machines and machines fail. The gauge must have been broken, showing full when I was actually running on fumes. The engine died about 2 miles later. I coasted as far as I could, managed to get onto the shoulder. When I checked my GPS, my stomach dropped. I was less than half a mile from that closed rest area my dad had warned me about. I sat there for a minute, feeling stupid. It was just an old rest stop, probably closed because of budget cuts or because they'd built a better one somewhere else. No reason to be nervous. I called the trucking company's emergency line, got a bored dispatcher who said they'd send a fuel truck, but it would be at least 2 hours, maybe 3. "Can you wait in your cab?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, "I'm not going anywhere." But sitting there in the dark with just my running lights on, I started feeling uneasy. The mountains on either side of the highway were black silhouettes against a slightly less black sky. No moon, no other vehicles, just silence and cold and the occasional groan of my truck settling. I tried to read on my phone, tried to watch a video, but my data signal was weak. The battery was at 60%. I turned down the brightness to conserve power and settled in to wait. That's when I heard the singing. It was faint at first, barely audible over the wind. A woman's voice, clear and sweet, singing something I didn't recognize. The melody was old-fashioned, reminded me of songs my grandmother used to hum. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the closed rest area. I told myself it was a radio somewhere, maybe from a passing car I hadn't noticed. But no cars passed. The singing continued, rising and falling, and after a while I realized it was getting closer. My doors were locked. I checked them twice, but I still felt exposed sitting there in the cab with the windows, even though I knew nobody could see in. My running lights lit up the area around my truck, but the cab was dark. The singing stopped abruptly, right in the middle of a phrase. The silence afterward felt heavier somehow, pressing against my ears. I held my breath, listening. 3 soft knocks on my passenger door. Tap, tap, tap. My whole body went rigid. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared at the passenger window where I could see nothing but my own faint reflection in the dark glass. "Do you need help?" a woman's voice called out. Pleasant, friendly. "I saw your lights. Are you broken down?" Every instinct screamed at me not to answer. But what if it was someone genuinely trying to help? What if I was being paranoid because of Dad's warning? "I'm fine," I called back. "Help is on the way." "It's cold out here," the voice said. "Maybe I could wait with you, keep you company." Something about the way she phrased it made my skin crawl. Not "can I wait in my car nearby," but "wait with you," implying she wanted inside my truck. "No thank you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm all right." Silence, then footsteps crunching in the gravel, moving around my truck. Slow, deliberate steps. I tracked the sound as it moved from the passenger side to the back of the trailer, then along the driver's side. I kept my eyes straight ahead, hands gripping the steering wheel even though the engine was dead. The footsteps stopped right outside my driver's door. "I just want to come in," the voice said, and now it was different, lower, raspier. I've been waiting here so long in the cold." I didn't respond. My phone was in my lap and I thought about calling 911, but what would I say? Someone's walking around my truck. That wasn't an emergency. That was barely a complaint. The door handle jiggled, once, twice, testing. Then something scraped against the door, a long, drawn-out screech of something hard dragging across metal. It made my teeth hurt. The scraping moved upward toward the window, and I finally looked over. There was a face pressed against the glass. But calling it a face isn't quite right. It had the general arrangement of features, eyes, nose, mouth, but they were all slightly wrong, like a child's drawing of a human face. The skin was too pale, almost translucent, and the eyes were completely black. No whites, no irises, just solid black orbs that somehow still conveyed they were looking at me. Its mouth stretched into a smile that showed too many teeth, thin, needle-like teeth that went back too far into its mouth. And it breathed on the glass, fogging it up, then dragged one finger through the fog to draw a simple shape, a circle with a line through it. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I just sat there staring while it watched me with those empty black eyes. Then headlights appeared in my side mirror, the fuel truck, arriving early by some miracle. The face vanished instantly, there 1 second and gone the next. I heard rapid footsteps running away from my truck, back toward the closed rest area. The fuel tech was a guy named Robert, maybe in his 50s, with a beard and a Carhartt jacket. He filled my tank while I sat in the cab with the doors locked, breathing hard. When he came to my window for the paperwork, he looked concerned. "You okay? You look pretty shaken up." I almost told him everything, but what would I say? "Yeah, just cold. Been sitting here a while." He nodded, handed me the clipboard. As he was walking back to his truck, he paused and looked toward the closed rest area. Then he looked back at me. "You didn't get out, did you? Didn't walk around?" "No," I said. "Why?" He shook his head. "Good, don't. My uncle used to work for the Forestry Service, said they closed this rest stop back in the 90s after too many incidents. People stopping here and disappearing, or people reporting strange encounters. Figured it was easier to just chain it off than deal with whatever's out here." He drove away, and I sat there for another minute before I got my nerve up to start the engine. It turned over fine, fuel gauge reading full now. Before I pulled back onto the highway, I glanced at my driver's side window. The fog from that thing's breath was still there, and so was the drawing, a circle with a line through it. I looked at it for a long time, trying to figure out what it meant, before I realized with creeping horror, it was a simple drawing of a person. A round head, a vertical line for the body, and it was crossed out. I drove straight through to Missoula without stopping, made the delivery, and called my dad from the parking lot. When I told him what happened, he was quiet for a long time. "That's why I told you not to stop," he finally said. "Whatever's at that rest area, it's been there since before they closed it, maybe longer. It wants drivers to stop to get out to let it in." My first mentor in this job stopped there back in '87. They found his truck a week later with the door hanging open. Never found him. I still have a photo of that drawing on my window, took it before I wiped it away. Sometimes when I'm driving at night and I see an abandoned rest area or a closed-down truck stop, I think about that face pressed against my glass and those dead black eyes watching me. And I wonder how many of them are out there, waiting at forgotten places along forgotten roads, hoping someone will finally stop. A story 3. Highway 50 across Nevada calls itself the loneliest road in America, and it's not lying. I was running a refrigerated load of medical supplies from Reno to Colorado Springs one of those time-sensitive hauls where you get paid extra if you deliver early. My co-driver had called in sick at the last minute, which meant I was doing the whole run solo. 2,300 miles, and I'd have to manage my hours carefully to make it work. The company I drove for back then, this was maybe 4 years ago, had just installed these new GPS tracking systems in all the trucks. They could monitor everything: speed, location, idle time, hard braking. The dispatcher could pull up your route at any time and see exactly where you were. I hated it at first, felt like I was being watched constantly, but I got used to it. That's how these things go. I left Reno around midnight, figuring I'd drive through the night while traffic was light. The refrigeration unit on the trailer was humming along fine, maintaining the 34 degrees required for the medical supplies. I had audiobooks downloaded, plenty of snacks, and a thermos of coffee my girlfriend had made before she dropped me off at the depot. It was one of those drives that should have been boring and uneventful, just me and the road and the darkness. Somewhere around Austin, Nevada, and I'm talking about the tiny Austin, population like 200, not the one in Texas, I saw brake lights ahead. A pickup truck pulled over on the shoulder with its hazards on. As I got closer, I could see someone standing next to it, waving their arms. I wasn't planning to stop. You really shouldn't on these empty highways, especially solo at 3 in the morning. But as I passed, my headlights swept over the person, and I saw it was an older woman, gray hair, wearing what looked like a nightgown or a long, light-colored dress. Something about that image bothered me. She looked out of place, vulnerable, like someone's grandmother stranded in the middle of nowhere. Against my better judgment, I started slowing down, checked my mirrors, and pulled onto the shoulder about 100 feet past her pickup. I sat there for a moment with the engine idling, air brakes sighing, trying to talk myself out of this. The GPS tracker on my dashboard blinked steadily, recording my stopped position. I grabbed my flashlight and my phone, made sure both were fully charged, climbed down from the cab. The wind out there was cold and constant, carrying the smell of dust and creosote. Her pickup was maybe a mid-90s Ford, dark-colored, and it looked abandoned. No lights on inside, no movement. "Hello," I called out. "You need help?" No answer. The woman I'd seen waving was gone, just her truck sitting there with the hazards clicking on and off, on and off. I walked closer, flashlight beams sweeping the area. The driver's door was hanging open, dome light off. I looked inside and saw the keys still in the ignition, a purse on the passenger seat, but no person. The interior had that stale smell of a vehicle that had been sitting closed up for a long time, even though the door was open. "Ma'am," I tried again, louder this time. "Over here," a voice called from the darkness beyond the shoulder. It sounded wrong, too flat, no emotion in it. "I've fallen. I need help getting up." Every horror movie I'd ever seen flashed through my mind. Don't go into the darkness. Don't leave the road. Don't be stupid. But what if she really had fallen? What if she was hurt? I moved toward the voice, keeping my flashlight pointed ahead. The ground dropped away from the highway shoulder into scrub brush and rocky soil. About 20 feet out, my flashlight found her, the gray-haired woman, sitting on the ground with her legs straight out in front of her. She wasn't looking at me. Her head was tilted down, chin to chest, like she was sleeping sitting up. "Are you hurt?" I asked, not getting any closer. She didn't respond, didn't move at all, just sat there in that unnatural position, perfectly still. I took one step closer, and my boot hit something that made a hollow sound. I pointed my flashlight down and saw I was standing on some kind of wooden boards, old, weathered planks half buried in the dirt. They formed a square about 6 feet across. A trapdoor, I realized, or the remains of one. Maybe an old mine shaft access or a cellar from a long-abandoned homestead. When I looked up, the woman was standing. She hadn't gotten up the normal way, hadn't rolled to her knees or used her hands to push herself. She'd just risen straight up from sitting to standing, like she was on an elevator. Her head was still tilted down, face hidden. "Thank you for stopping," she said in that same flat voice. "I've been waiting." I took a step back. Waiting for what? She raised her head then, and even in the flashlight beam I could tell something was horribly wrong with her face. The features were smudged, indistinct, like someone had tried to sculpt a human face from clay but didn't quite remember what humans looked like. Her eyes caught the light and reflected it back, not red like animal eyes, but silver like mirrors. "Waiting for someone to open it," she said, and pointed down at the wooden boards beneath my feet. I stumbled backward, nearly tripped over the scrub brush. She didn't follow, just stood there pointing. Behind her I saw movement, other figures standing in the darkness, maybe 3 or 4 of them, all perfectly still, all watching me. I ran, flat out sprinted back to my truck, flashlight beam bouncing wildly, breath coming in gasps. I could hear footsteps behind me, multiple sets, but they sounded strange, like someone slapping hands on the ground rather than feet running. I didn't look back. Just focused on my truck, on the lights, on getting back to something real and solid. I hit the cab, dragged myself up, slammed the door and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key turned. The engine roared to life, and I threw it into gear without checking my mirrors, without looking behind me. Just floored it, felt the truck lurch forward. In my driver's side mirror, I caught a glimpse of them, 5 or 6 figures standing in a line across the road, watching my truck disappear. None of them were waving. They just stood there like mannequins until the darkness swallowed them. I drove for 2 hours straight without stopping, didn't even slow down. When I finally felt like I could breathe again, I pulled into a Love's truck, stopped outside of Ely, and sat in the bright fluorescent light of the parking lot, surrounded by other trucks, other drivers, other human beings. I called the Nevada Highway Patrol and reported the abandoned pickup. Gave them the approximate location, described what I'd seen, or at least the parts that wouldn't make me sound insane. They took my information and said they'd send someone to check it out. 3 days later, after I'd made my delivery and was heading back west, I called the Highway Patrol again to follow up. The dispatcher I talked to sounded confused. "We sent a unit to that location," she said. "Nothing there. No abandoned vehicle, no tire tracks in the shoulder, nothing." "That's impossible," I said. "I saw it. I have the exact GPS coordinates from my truck's tracking system." She put me on hold, came back 5 minutes later. "Sir, according to your company's GPS records, your truck didn't stop at that location. Shows you drove straight through Austin without stopping. Your first stop was at the Love's in Ely, around 5:47 a.m. But I had stopped. I knew I had. I'd gotten out, walked over to that pickup, stood on those wooden boards. It had happened." When I got home, I checked my phone. The timestamp showed I'd climbed back in my truck at 3:47 a.m. The Love's receipt showed I'd bought coffee at 5:47 a.m., 2 hours exactly. But the drive from Austin to Ely should take about 90 minutes, maybe less at highway speeds with no traffic. I lost time somewhere, or gained it. I still don't know which. What bothers me most is the GPS. If it didn't record me stopping, if my company's tracking system shows I drove straight through, then what happened during those missing minutes? Where was I while I thought I was standing in the darkness with those things watching me? I still drive Highway 50 sometimes. It's the main route across Nevada, hard to avoid in this job. But I never stop anymore between Reno and Ely. Never pull over for anyone or anything. I've seen that same pickup truck 3 more times over the years, always pulled over with hazards on, always in roughly the same area. Sometimes I see the woman waving. Sometimes I see her standing perfectly still, watching my truck pass. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm driving through that empty stretch, I wonder if I really did escape, or if I'm still standing on those wooden boards in the darkness, with those silver-eyed things gathered around me, and everything since then has been something else wearing my life like a coat. The story 4. I grew up around trucks. My grandfather owned a small freight company in Arkansas, and my Uncle Dalton drove for him until the business closed in 2006. When I got my CDL, Uncle Dalton gave me his old logbook, one of the paper ones from before everything went electronic, and inside the front cover, he'd written a list of routes to avoid. Most of them made sense: roads known for accidents, areas with aggressive way stations, stretches where trucks got targeted by thieves. But one entry just said, US Route 83 through South Dakota after dark, especially near Mission. I asked him about it once. He got quiet, stared into his coffee cup, then said, "Just don't drive it at night. If you have to, drive fast and don't look at the side of the road." That was 7 years ago. Last fall, I forgot about the warning. I was hauling farm equipment from Texas to North Dakota, running behind schedule because of a delayed loading dock. By the time I hit the South Dakota border, it was already past 9 p.m., and I still had 6 hours of driving ahead of me. Route 83 was the straightest shot north, would save me almost an hour compared to taking the interstate. The road was empty, just flat grassland on either side, no lights except my headlights and the occasional ranch house set back a mile from the road. I had the radio going, some classic rock station out of Rapid City, and I was drinking a Red Bull I'd grabbed at the last gas station. My eyes felt gritty, and I was looking forward to finding a rest area and grabbing a few hours of sleep. Around 10:30, the radio started cutting out. Static, then music, then static again. I tried switching stations but got the same thing, either nothing or that empty hiss. Annoying but not unusual in rural areas. I turned it off and drove in silence, just the rumble of the engine and the sound of the tires on asphalt. That's when I noticed the figures. They were standing about 50 feet back from the edge of the road in the grassland. At first, I thought they were fence posts or road signs, just dark vertical shapes against the slightly lighter sky. But as I passed one, my peripheral vision caught movement, the shape turning to follow my truck. I glanced in my side mirror and saw it clearly in my taillights, a person-shaped figure standing motionless, facing my direction. Probably just someone from a nearby ranch, I told myself. Out checking fences or looking for lost cattle. But at 10:30 at night, in the dark, miles from any buildings, I saw another one a quarter mile later, then another. They were spaced irregularly along the roadside, always set back in the grass, always facing the road. As I passed each one, it would turn to watch my truck. I could see the movement in my mirrors, slow, deliberate rotation. After the 7th or 8th figure, I started counting. They appeared every few hundred yards, sometimes closer. By the time I'd driven 5 miles, I'd counted 23. My hands were tight on the wheel. I thought about Uncle Dalton's warning, about how he'd specifically mentioned not looking at the side of the road. But it was too late. I'd already seen them. And now I couldn't stop looking, couldn't stop checking my mirrors to see if they were still there, still watching. The headlights caught something different ahead, not standing in the grass this time, but at the edge of the road itself. I slowed down without meaning to, my foot easing off the gas. As I got closer, I could see it was a person sitting cross-legged on the shoulder, right at the edge of the asphalt. They were wearing what looked like old-fashioned clothing, dark and shapeless. I was maybe 100 feet away when they stood up and stepped into my lane. I laid on the horn, a long blast that echoed across the empty grassland. The figure didn't move. Just stood there in the center of my lane, and as my headlights lit them up fully, I saw they had no face. Where features should have been was just smooth, blank skin, like an unfinished sculpture. I swerved into the oncoming lane, no traffic, thank God, and passed them close enough that they could have reached out and touched my trailer. In my mirror, I saw them standing in the road, motionless, and behind them, all those other figures had moved closer to the road. They were maybe 20 feet from the asphalt now, a line of them stretching back as far as I could see. I pressed down on the accelerator, pushed the truck faster. 65, 70, 75. The engine was roaring and my trailer was swaying slightly, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away from this stretch of road, needed to reach a town or a gas station or anywhere with lights and other people. Something hit the side of my trailer with a loud metallic bang, then another hit on the other side. I checked my mirrors but couldn't see what was hitting me. The impacts kept coming, irregular but frequent, like someone was throwing stones at a barn. Bang, bang, bang. The passenger window exploded inward, safety glass spraying across the cab. I felt something cold rush in, not wind, something else. Something that made my breath visible in puffs, even though the heater was running. The impacts on the trailer stopped. I could hear breathing in the cab with me. Not my breathing, this was slower, deeper, coming from somewhere behind my seat. I kept my eyes locked on the road ahead, both hands gripping the wheel, every muscle in my body rigid. "Pull over," a voice said. It came from directly behind my head, close enough that I could feel cold air on my neck when it spoke. "Pull over and join us." "No," I said, barely a whisper. "You're supposed to be with us," the voice continued. It sounded sad, almost pleading. "You were supposed to stop. We've been waiting." I saw lights ahead, actual electrical lights, the orange glow of sodium vapor lamps. A town, or at least a gas station. I focused on those lights, used them as an anchor. Just get there, just reach the lights. "You'll come back," the voice said. "Everyone comes back eventually." The cold presence vanished. The breathing stopped. I was alone in the cab again, except for the wind whistling through the broken window. I pulled into a Sinclair station in Mission, South Dakota, at 11:47 p.m. according to the timestamp on my receipt. I sat in the parking lot under the bright canopy lights until sunrise, too afraid to close my eyes, too afraid to drive back south on that road. When it was light enough to see clearly, I walked around my truck to inspect the damage. The passenger window was shattered, like I knew it would be. But the trailer, where I'd heard all those impacts, where it had sounded like dozens of heavy objects striking metal, there wasn't a mark on it, not a dent, not a scratch. The trailer looked exactly like it had when I'd left Texas. I drove the rest of the way to North Dakota with a trash bag taped over the broken window. Made the delivery, filed an insurance claim for the glass, told them I must have hit a rock or debris on the highway. They replaced the window, no questions asked. But here's what I can't explain. When I got home and was going through the paperwork from that trip, I found something tucked into my logbook. A photograph, old and faded, the kind developed from film. It showed a group of people standing alongside a road, maybe a dozen of them, all wearing old-fashioned clothing from maybe the 1920s or 30s. They were standing in a line, facing the camera, and every single one of them had no face. Just smooth, blank skin where their features should have been. On the back, written in handwriting I didn't recognize, Route 83, 1934. I burned the photograph, threw it in my fireplace and watched it curl and blacken and disappear. But I'd already seen it, already memorized those featureless faces. And late at night, when I'm trying to sleep, I think about what that voice said. Everyone comes back eventually. I'll never drive Route 83 after dark again. I'll take the long way, the slow way, the inconvenient way. Because part of me is terrified that if I go back, I'll see myself standing in that line, face smooth and blank, waiting for the next truck to pass. The story 5. The truck stop off I-17 near Limon, Colorado, used to be my favorite place to grab sleep. Clean bathrooms, decent food, and most importantly, it was always busy, trucks coming and going at all hours, which meant you never felt isolated. I'd probably stayed there 50 times over the course of my career, always had a good experience. That changed last March. I'd been driving for 14 hours, not all at once. I'm legal about my logs, but I was tired enough that my eyes were starting to play tricks on me. You know that feeling where the road seems to shimmer and you're not sure if you're seeing things or if you're just exhausted? I was at that point. Pulled into the Limon stop around 2 in the morning, found a parking spot near the back of the lot where it was quieter, killed the engine. The plan was to sleep for 8 hours, then push on to Kansas City. I had some clothes in a duffel behind my seat, toiletries, all the stuff you need for living in a truck most of the week. I brushed my teeth using a bottle of water, changed into sweatpants, set an alarm on my phone. The curtain that separated the cab from the sleeper berth was drawn shut. Everything was routine, comfortable, familiar. I was almost asleep when I heard the tapping. Soft, rhythmic tapping on the side of the truck. Down low near the fuel tanks. Tap, tap, tap. Pause, tap, tap, tap. I tried to ignore it. Truck stops are noisy. People walking around, trucks idling, refrigeration units running. Probably just someone walking past, their keys or belt buckle hitting my trailer. But the tapping continued, same rhythm, same location. I pulled the curtain aside and looked out the passenger window. The truck stop was well lit, but my parking spot was at the edge of the lot where the lights didn't quite reach. I could see other trucks in the rows ahead of me, but the area directly outside my passenger side was in shadow. The tapping stopped. I waited, listening. Nothing. Just the ambient sounds of the truck stop, distant engines, the hum of electrical lines overhead. I was about to lie back down when I saw movement in my passenger mirror. Someone was crouched down near my fuel tank, partially hidden by my truck. A lot lizard, I figured. That's what truckers call the prostitutes who work truck stops, though it's not a term I like using. They'll knock on trucks in the middle of the night, looking for customers. I wasn't interested, never have been, and I was too tired to be polite about it. I rolled down my driver's side window. "Hey," I called out, "not interested, move along." The figure near my fuel tank slowly stood up and stepped into the light. It was a woman, or at least, it had the general shape of a woman. Tall, wearing a long dress or coat that looked old-fashioned, like something from 100 years ago. Her hair was dark and long, hanging down over her face so I couldn't see her features. She didn't say anything. Just stood there perfectly still, facing my truck. I said, "I'm not interested," I called out again, louder this time. She took a step toward my passenger side, then another. Slow, gliding steps that didn't quite look like walking. Her feet, I couldn't see her feet. The bottom of her dress dragged on the ground, hiding them. Something about her movement made my skin crawl. I pulled my head back inside and rolled up the window, locked both doors, checked them twice. She was still approaching, and now she was raising one arm, reaching toward my passenger door. I hit the horn. 3 long blasts that echoed across the truck stop. Several drivers in nearby trucks looked over, and I saw someone walking toward the main building turn around to see what the commotion was about. The woman stopped. She lowered her arm and tilted her head, not like she was looking at me, but like she was listening to something. Then she turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows between trucks. My heart was hammering. I told myself I'd overreacted, that she was probably harmless, just someone looking for money or help. But I couldn't shake the image of her movements, the way she'd glided rather than walked, the way her head had tilted at that unnatural angle. I tried to sleep but couldn't. Every sound made me jump. Other trucks starting their engines, footsteps on the pavement, the hiss of air brakes. Around 3:30, I gave up and decided to go into the main building, get some coffee, sit in the well-lit restaurant area until dawn. I grabbed my wallet and phone, opened my driver's door and froze. She was standing between 2 trucks about 20 feet away, facing my direction. The lights from the building behind her created a silhouette, but I could see her long hair hanging down and that old-fashioned dress touching the ground. She was completely motionless. I looked away, focused on the building entrance. If I walked quickly, I'd be there in 30 seconds. There were other people around. I could see at least 3 other drivers walking across the lot. I'd be fine. I climbed down from my cab, locked the door and started walking. Didn't look back at her, just focused on the entrance, on the light, on the promise of being around other people. I was halfway across the lot when I heard footsteps behind me. Fast, purposeful footsteps. I walked faster, not quite running, and the footsteps matched my pace. My shoulder blades itched, anticipating a touch. The entrance was 15 feet away, 10 feet. I grabbed the door handle and yanked it open, practically threw myself inside. The warmth and bright lights of the truck stop hit me, and I finally turned around to look back through the glass door. She was standing right outside, maybe 3 feet from the door. Her head was tilted down, hair hanging over her face, and she was completely still again. Behind her, I could see the parking lot continuing on normally, trucks, drivers walking around, everything ordinary. "You okay, buddy?" A voice beside me made me jump. One of the staff, a middle-aged guy in a uniform polo, was looking at me with concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I gestured toward the door. "That woman outside. She followed me from my truck." He looked out the glass door, then back at me, confused. "What woman?" I turned. The spot where she'd been standing was empty. Just the parking lot, the lights, the trucks, no sign of her. "She was right there," I said. "Long dark hair, old-fashioned dress." His expression changed, not to disbelief, but to something else. Recognition maybe, or resignation. "When did you park?" he asked quietly. "Couple hours ago, around 2. "Which row?" "Back row, near the edge of the lot." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Come on, I'll get you some coffee." "On the house." He led me to the restaurant area, poured me a large coffee, and sat down across from me in one of the booths. The place was mostly empty, just a couple other drivers nursing late-night meals. "How long have you been stopping here?" he asked. "Years, maybe 7, 8 years, never had a problem before." He nodded. "Most people don't. Most people park in the main section, closer to the building, and they never see her. But people who park at the edges sometimes do, especially that back row." "Say who?" "We don't know her name. Happened before the truck stop was built, way back. This used to be open land, part of an old homestead. Story goes a woman disappeared out here in the 1920s, found dead near what's now the back of the parking lot. They never figured out what happened to her, whether it was an accident or murder or exposure. I wanted to tell him that was ridiculous, that ghost stories were for campfires and Halloween, but I'd seen her, I'd heard her. And the way he was talking, flat, matter of fact, told me he'd heard this story from other drivers before. What does she want? I asked. He shook his head. Nobody knows. She appears, watches people, sometimes follows them. Never seen her hurt anyone, but she scares the hell out of folks. We've had drivers refuse to stop here after an encounter. We lose business over it, but what are we going to do? Can't exactly call an exorcist for the parking lot. I stayed in that restaurant until sunrise, drinking coffee and watching the darkness fade outside the windows. When it was fully light, I walked back to my truck. In the daylight, with other drivers around and traffic on the interstate visible beyond the lot, it seemed impossible that anything strange had happened. But when I walked around my truck to do my pre-trip inspection, I found something that made my blood run cold. In the dirt and grime on the side of my trailer, someone had drawn a shape with their finger, a crude stick figure of a person with long hair, and underneath it, words written in that same finger-drawn style, "Come back." I took a picture of it, then immediately went to the truck wash and had my entire trailer cleaned, paid extra for them to hand scrub it. I wanted that image gone, erased like it had never existed. I still stop at the Lemon truck stop sometimes. It's a convenient location on my route, hard to avoid. But I always park in the front row now, as close to the building as possible, and I never stay past dawn. Because I know she's still there, somewhere at the back of the lot, waiting for someone to park in the shadows, waiting to follow them, waiting for them to come back. A story 6. My first winter driving long haul, I got a rush delivery assignment that I probably should have turned down. But I was new, eager to prove myself, and the pay was almost double the usual rate. The load was temperature-sensitive medical equipment going from Minneapolis to Duluth, not a long drive in normal conditions, but this was mid-January during a winter storm advisory. They wanted it there by morning. The dispatcher's voice over the phone had been apologetic. "I know it's not ideal conditions, Tommy, but the equipment is critical. Hospital needs it for surgeries tomorrow. If you don't feel comfortable, I can try to find someone else." I was 24 and thought I was invincible. "I can handle it," ID said. I left Minneapolis around 8 p.m. just as the snow started. The first hour wasn't bad, light flurries, roads mostly clear, other traffic moving at reasonable speeds. I had Highway 35 almost to myself, and I was making good time. The heater was working well. I had a thermos of hot chocolate my roommate had made, and classic rock was playing on the radio. I remember thinking this was easier than I'd expected. Around 10 p.m., the storm got serious. The flurries turned into heavy snow, the kind that makes your headlights almost useless because they just reflect back white. Visibility dropped to maybe 50 feet. I slowed down to 45, then 40, then 35. The highway was still passable, but I was the only vehicle I'd seen in 20 minutes. My phone rang, the dispatcher. "Tommy, how's it going?" "Slow," I said. "Visibility's pretty bad, but I'm managing." Minnesota DOT just issued a no-travel advisory for that stretch. They're closing 35 north of Hinckley. You need to find a place to pull off and wait it out. How long? Could be a few hours, could be all night. Storms worse than they predicted. I was frustrated, but not stupid enough to argue with a no-travel advisory. any truck stops nearby. There was a pause while she checked. Nothing within safe distance. But there's an emergency pull-off about 5 miles ahead, usually used by snowplows. Pull in there and wait. I'll update the hospital, let them know you'll be delayed. The pull-off was basically just a widened shoulder with a small maintenance building, the kind of place highway crews use for storing salt and equipment. I pulled in, killed the engine to save fuel, and settled in to wait. The snow was coming down so hard I couldn't see more than a few feet beyond my windshield. It was like being inside a snow globe someone was shaking violently. I ate a sandwich I'd packed, drank some hot chocolate, tried to read on my phone. But the data signal was weak, and my battery was draining faster than usual, probably the cold affecting it. After about an hour, I was getting bored and restless. That's when I saw the light. It was moving through the snow, off to the side of my truck, a yellow-orange glow like a lantern or a flashlight. At first I thought it was a highway crew member checking on me, but as I watched, the light moved in a strange pattern, not walking back and forth like someone working, but circling, going around my truck in a slow, deliberate loop. I rolled down my window and leaned out, snow immediately hitting my face. "Hello, I'm okay in here, just waiting out the storm." Light stopped moving. It hung in the swirling snow about 20 feet away, and I couldn't see who or what was holding it. Then it started moving again, closer this time. I rolled up my window. Something about that light bothered me. The way it moved felt wrong, too smooth and steady. And why would a highway crew be out here on foot during a no-travel advisory? The light came right up to my passenger window and stopped. In its glow, I could see snow swirling, but I couldn't see anyone holding it. It was just there, floating in the air, pressed against my window like someone looking in. My heart was pounding. I reached over and made sure the passenger door was locked, which felt stupid because who locks their door against a light? But I did it anyway. The light moved slowly across my windshield, then down the driver's side. I tracked it in my mirror, watched it circle behind the cab, move along the trailer. It took almost 5 minutes to complete a full circle, and then it started over. Around and around my truck, that steady yellow-orange glow in the snow. I tried calling the dispatcher but got no signal. Tried 911, same thing. The storm must have knocked out the cell towers. I was completely isolated out here, just me and this impossible light circling endlessly in the snow. After maybe 20 circuits, the light stopped directly in front of my truck. It hung there in the snow, maybe 10 feet from my bumper, and I could see it more clearly now. It wasn't a lantern or a flashlight. It looked like a sphere of fire about the size of a basketball, but the flames didn't flicker or move the way real fire does. They were frozen in place, locked in a perpetual shape. Then I heard the singing. It was faint, barely audible over the wind, but it was definitely singing. A man's voice, deep and resonant, singing something in a language I didn't recognize. Not quite words, more like prolonged vowel sounds with complex harmonics. It made me think of throat singing or chanting, something old and ceremonial. The ball of frozen fire began to rise, moving straight up until it was at windshield level. And behind it, or maybe through it, I couldn't tell, I saw a face. It was indistinct, made of smoke or shadow or maybe just suggestion, but it was definitely a human face. An old face, weathered and lined, with hollow eyes that looked directly at me. The mouth was moving, forming the shapes of that strange singing. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Just sat there staring at this impossible thing while it sang at me through the windshield. The face tilted its head, studying me. Then it smiled, a gentle, sad smile, and the ball of fire began to descend. It dropped down below my hood line, and I lost sight of it. I sat there frozen for another minute before I found the courage to lean forward and look down. The light was on the ground directly in front of my truck, and the snow around it was melting. Not evaporating or steaming, just melting away to reveal bare asphalt in a perfect circle. As I watched, the light began to move forward, melting a path through the snow. It created a clear strip of bare road maybe 8 feet wide, heading north along the highway, the direction I needed to go. The singing stopped. The storm was still raging, snow falling as heavily as before, but this one clear path remained, stretching away into the darkness. I don't know how long I sat there trying to decide what to do. Every logical part of my brain said to stay put, wait for the storm to pass, don't follow the mysterious, impossible light. But another part, maybe instinct, maybe something else, said that light was offering help, showing me the way. I started my engine, put the truck in gear. Slowly, carefully, I followed the melted path through the storm. It took 2 hours to reach Duluth, following that impossible clear road while snow raged on either side. The ball of fire stayed about 100 feet ahead of me, just visible through the storm, melting a path as it went. I passed several cars and trucks that had slid off into ditches, got stuck, or just given up. But my path was clear and dry, like driving on a spring day. When I reached the Duluth city limits, where the storm was lighter and the roads were plowed, the ball of fire simply disappeared. 1 second it was there, leading me forward, and the next it was gone. I drove the rest of the way to the hospital on normal roads, made the delivery just before dawn. The delivery clerk was surprised to see me. Didn't think anyone would make it through that storm. They closed 35 last night. I found a way, I said. Later, when I called my dispatcher to confirm the delivery, she asked how I'd gotten through. Dot said nothing was moving on that highway from midnight to 6 a.m. They had plows stuck. I told her I'd waited at the pull-off, that the storm cleared enough for me to drive around 3 a.m. She accepted it, marked the delivery complete, and that was that. But I know what I saw. I know what led me through that storm. And here's the thing I can't stop thinking about. That face in the fire looked familiar. Not like someone I knew personally, but like faces I'd seen in old photographs. Native American faces, specifically, the kind in historical photos from the 1800s. I looked up the history of that area later. Highway 35 cuts through what used to be Ojibwe territory. There are stories, if you know where to look, about spirit lights that appear during storms to guide travelers to safety. They're called will-o'-the-wisps in European folklore, but the Ojibwe have different names for them, treat them with more respect. I've driven that route maybe 30 times since then, in all kinds of weather. I've never seen the light again. But sometimes, late at night when the road is empty and the stars are bright, I'll say a quiet thank you to whatever it was that guided me through the storm, because I'm certain I wouldn't have made it without help. And I'm equally certain that help came from something that shouldn't exist, something that operates by rules I don't understand. A story 7. Last April, I took a load from Atlanta to Seattle, one of those cross-country hauls that takes 4 days and crosses multiple time zones. I'd been driving for maybe 11 years at that point, done that route probably 50 times. I knew every major truck stop, every good place to eat, every stretch of road where the state police like to camp with their speed guns. What I didn't know was that I-90 through Montana had been having problems. I found out about it at a truck stop in Billings from another driver named Hector. We were both getting fuel and he noticed my route paperwork. "You heading west on 90?" he asked. "Yes, straight through to Spokane, then down to Seattle." "Why?" He looked uncomfortable. "You heard about the disappearances?" I hadn't, Turned out 3 commercial trucks had gone missing over the past 8 months on the stretch of I-90 between Billings and Missoula. Not broken down, not crashed, just gone. The trucks were found eventually, days later, pulled off on Forest Service roads miles from the interstate. Empty, no drivers, no signs of struggle, no explanation. Highway Patrol thinks it's hijackings, Hector said. Some kind of organized group forcing drivers off the road, stealing the trucks, dumping them when they realize there's tracking systems. But nobody's seen anything suspicious, and the cargoes are usually still there. They're not stealing the freight, just the trucks themselves. And the drivers are never found. Jesus, I said, that's... Yeah, he shook his head. Might want to take 94 north through North Dakota instead. Longer, but safer, just a thought. I thanked him and promised I'd think about it. But I-94 would add almost 6 hours to my trip, and I was already running tight on my delivery window. I figured I'd drive during daylight, stay alert, keep my doors locked. What else could I do? I left Billings around 6 a.m., planning to reach Missoula by early afternoon. The Montana stretch of I-90 is beautiful, mountains, forests, wide rivers, but it's also remote. There are long stretches where you don't see much civilization, just wilderness and occasional rest areas. Everything was fine until around 10 a.m. I was somewhere between Big Timber and Livingston, in a section where the highway runs through a mountain pass. Traffic was light. I'd see another vehicle every few minutes, but it wasn't crowded. The radio was playing and I was relaxed, just enjoying the drive. That's when my CB radio crackled to life. I hadn't heard any chatter in over an hour, so I turned up the volume. Following me for 20 miles now, a man's voice, strained and frightened. Won't pass, won't drop back, just staying right behind my trailer. Static, then another voice. What kind of vehicle? Can't tell, my mirrors just show headlights. They're so bright I can't see past them. But it's too low to be another truck. Maybe a car, but who follows a semi for 20 miles? I checked my own mirrors. Traffic behind me looked normal. A couple cars at reasonable distances, nothing unusual. But listening to that frightened voice on the CB made my shoulders tense. Try slowing down, the second voice suggested. Let them pass. I did, drop down to 55. They slowed down too, still right behind me. Where are you? Mile marker, hell, I don't know. Somewhere past Livingston. There's nothing out here, no exits, no place to pull off. I grabbed my CB handset. This is westbound 90, mile marker 337. If you need help, I'm about 10 minutes ahead. I can slow down, let you catch up. Silence, no response. I tried again, but got nothing except static. 5 minutes later, I crested a hill and saw it. A semi pulled off on the narrow shoulder, hazard lights flashing. As I got closer, I could see the driver standing outside, phone to his ear, gesturing frantically. His cab door was hanging open. I started to slow down, intending to pull over and help, when I saw something that made me accelerate instead. Behind his truck, maybe 50 feet back on the shoulder, was a vehicle, but not a normal vehicle. I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. It looked like a car from certain angles, but the proportions were wrong. Too long, too low, and the windshield seemed to be at an impossible angle. And the driver standing by his truck wasn't on his phone. His hand was empty, pressed against the side of his head, but there was no phone. He was just standing there with his hand to his ear, mouth moving like he was talking to someone. I drove past, heart hammering, and watched in my mirror as the scene receded. The driver never looked at my truck, just kept standing there with his empty hand pressed to his head, and that wrong-shaped vehicle behind him remained motionless. I grabbed my CB. Breaker, breaker. This is westbound 90, near mile marker 340. There's a driver pulled over who looks like he needs help, but something's not right. Can someone call highway patrol? Responses came immediately, multiple voices asking for details. I described what I'd seen, gave the location. A trucker heading east said he'd passed that spot 20 minutes ago and there was nothing there, no pulled over truck, no vehicle on the shoulder. That's impossible, I said. I just saw it. Maybe I missed it, he said, but he didn't sound convinced. I kept driving, checking my mirrors every few seconds, half expecting to see that wrong-shaped vehicle appear behind me. The highway stretched ahead, winding through the mountains, and I realized I was completely alone on this stretch. No other vehicles visible in either direction. My CB crackled again. "Help me, please," the same voice from before, the driver who'd been followed. But now he sounded different. Flat, emotionless, like he was reading from a script. "Pulled over at mile marker 342. Need help." I was at mile marker 346. Whatever I'd passed was behind me, and I was already 4 miles ahead. "Where are you really?" I asked into the handset. "What's happening?" "Mile marker 342. Please help, hurting." The last word sent chills down my spine. Not hurt, but hurting, present tense, ongoing, and that flat, emotionless tone made it sound like he was reporting a fact rather than asking for assistance. I turned off my CB. Whatever was happening back there, I wanted no part of it. I pushed my speed up to 70, then 75, taking the curves faster than I should have. I just needed to get through this section, reach Bozeman, find a busy truck stop with lots of people and lights. That's when I noticed the car pacing me. It had appeared in my driver's side mirror without me seeing it approach, just suddenly there, keeping perfect pace with my truck. A sedan, dark-colored, with tinted windows. Driving in the lane next to me, matching my speed exactly, I sped up. The car sped up. I slowed down. The car slowed down. It stayed perfectly aligned with my cab, like we were connected by an invisible rod. I tried to see the driver, but the windows were too dark. No reflection, no hint of who or what was inside. Just that dark car pacing me, never dropping back and never pulling ahead. My heart was slamming against my ribs. I thought about swerving into the car, forcing it off the road. But what if it was just a normal person driving? What if I was panicking over nothing, except it wasn't nothing? That car had no license plate. The back end, visible in my mirror, was smooth and blank where a plate should be. The highway ahead showed an exit, a tiny town called Graycliff, population probably less than 100. Not much there, but it was something. I signaled and started to move into the exit lane. The car matched my movement, staying perfectly aligned. We took the exit together, my truck and this impossible vehicle, and I was screaming inside my head for it to just go away, leave me alone, let me be. The exit ramp curved up and away from the interstate. At the top was a stop sign and a 2-lane road disappearing into trees. I stopped at the sign, and the car stopped beside me, still perfectly aligned. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, both of us motionless. Then slowly, the car's passenger window began to roll down. I couldn't see inside, it was just darkness, even though it was broad daylight. And from that darkness, a hand emerged. It was pale, too pale, like something that had never seen sunlight. And the fingers were too long, joints too numerous, bending in ways human fingers don't bend. It reached toward my truck, stretching impossibly far, and I watched in frozen horror as those fingers touched my driver's side door. The metal where it touched went instantly cold. I could feel it through the door, through the air itself. Ice began to form on the window, spreading outward from where those fingers made contact. I floored the accelerator and my truck lurched forward, engine roaring. Behind me, I heard a sound like metal tearing, and my side mirror showed the car sitting motionless at the stop sign, that hand still extended from the window. I drove into Greycliff doing 50 in a 30 zone, past a gas station and a few houses, until I reached what looked like a small community center. There were people outside, actual people, normal and real, doing what looked like a yard sale setup. I pulled into the parking lot, killed the engine, and just sat there shaking. One of the women from the yard sale walked over, concerned. "You okay, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost." I climbed down from my cab and checked the driver's door. Where those fingers had touched, there were marks, 5 parallel grooves in the metal, like someone had dragged their nails through soft clay. And the metal around the marks was discolored, oxidized, like it had aged 50 years in an instant. I stayed in Greycliff for 3 hours, sitting at a picnic table outside that community center, drinking coffee someone brought me, surrounded by people having normal conversations about normal things. Eventually, I found the courage to get back in my truck and continue west. But I took surface roads, avoiding I-90 entirely, adding 6 hours to my trip. When I finally delivered my load in Seattle 2 days late, I filed a report with my company about mechanical issues. Didn't mention what I'd actually seen. Who would believe it? But here's what keeps me up at night. A week after I got home, I saw a news article. Another truck had been found abandoned on I-90 in Montana, pulled off on a Forest Service road near a town called Greycliff. The cargo was still there, everything intact. But the driver, a man named Marcus Delgado, was gone. The only unusual detail mentioned in the article was that his truck had strange marks on the driver's side door, like something had clawed through the metal. I saved that article. I look at it sometimes and wonder if Marcus Delgado heard that voice on the CB2, if he saw a wrong-shaped vehicle following him, if a pale hand reached out from impossible darkness and touched his door. And I wonder if he was just a little less lucky than me, if he hesitated a second too long or took a turn that led somewhere he couldn't come back from. I still drive I-90 sometimes when the route requires it, but only during the day, never alone if I can help it, and I always keep my CB turned off. Because I think whatever is out there on that highway is calling drivers, luring them, offering help that isn't help at all. And I think that voice on the radio, the one asking for assistance, wasn't a driver in trouble. I think it was bait. And I think it's still out there, still broadcasting, still waiting for someone to stop and answer its call. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, hit that like button and subscribe for more true horror from the road. Let me know in the comments which story unsettled you most. Was it the handprints in the door, the thing at the rest stop, or something else entirely? Share this with your friends who love a good scare. Until next time, stay safe out there, and remember, not every voice asking for help is human.